Right, we're going to move on now. We're going to talk about something completely different. And prosecutors have called for clemency over mercy killing cases in what's being interpreted as a move towards the legalisation of assisted dying. Well, the Crown Prosecution Service has said it will now be unlikely that charges will be brought where a victim clearly wanted to die and a suspect was under emotional pressure to assist them. This comes also as an anorexic woman has been granted the choice to die by a judge, just 24 years old, and despite lacking, we are told, capacity to take decisions on her medical treatment due to the fact that she is now so ill and so unwell from lack of food, but yet her parents are pleading for her to be kept alive. Well, to discuss both of those cases, and joining me right now is Trevor Moore. He's chair of the campaign group My Death, My Decision. Good afternoon to you.
Hello, and thanks very much for covering this important topic.
Trevor, it's a topic I've covered on regularly in newspapers and on radio and television shows throughout my career, because we know that the law is very much behind where a lot of the people of this country are, and indeed the polling would show in terms of what is the appropriate reaction to these awful, terrible, heartbreaking cases. Now, we've had a couple of cases recently where people have faced prosecution when they have taken the life, assisted the death of a loved one, often a husband or a wife, and their life has been destroyed. Sometimes it's a murder-suicide, effectively, where they fail to take their own life. And then they get prosecuted. Sometimes mercy is shown, sometimes not. It was high time that the Crown Prosecution Service sort of actually made it clear and gave more clearer guidelines on this. Do you at least welcome that change?
Absolutely. It's a welcome stepping stone. But one thing that an assisted dying law would do is take away the grim and gruesome deaths that we see through either mercy killings or suicide pacts. I mean, I don't know if you remember last year there was a Graham and Diane Mansfield, and Graham killed his wife. I'm not even going to say how he did it, and tried to kill himself. There was a whole issue of whether he should be prosecuted. If we had a compassionate assisted dying law and Diane had been able to make her wishes known and gone through what can be a very sensible, regulated and safeguarded process, then she could have died at home when and where she wished, surrounded by, if they wanted to, friends and family and so on. Yeah. And as you say, I mean, if you did a poll of polls, I would say on average they come out around 80% of the public support having an assisted dying law.
And indeed, because a lot of people will know people who've gone through this. And again, when it's people who are in a lot of pain and it's only going one way, it's going to get worse. It's stress to them, distress to their families and loved ones, but also people who just say, I don't have value in my life. Now, someone who maybe have an accident and become a paraplegic may say, I've still got value in my life, it's still a life worth living, and we should give every possible support. There have been cases of people who say, no, this isn't a valuable life to me. This is not what I mean by living. And we need to respect that, don't we? We need to have a lot of safeguards. There's no doubt at all. I want the courts to be involved. I want this to, every possible safeguard. But the right to choose your own death should surely be a sort of a fundamental right.
Yes, it does come down to autonomy, and I do think what matters is what the person thinks. So ultimately, when other jurisdictions, there are now 29, by the way, around the world that have an assisted dying law, the question of whether someone is suffering unbearably is subjective. It's down to that individual. It's not for medics to say, you're not suffering enough, kind of thing. Yeah. And I think that's really important. It comes down to the individual choice. I think in California, they call it the End of Life Option Act, which I think is a good one because it makes it clear it's a choice. It wouldn't be for everybody, but we should have that choice.
Yes, no one's going to be... The fear that's being stoked up about this is this idea that we're going to be going around just killing people. No, we're going to have lots of safeguards. It's been a very popular move in many of the countries where it's been done. But also at the moment, there is an option for people who can afford it. I think it's on average, it's now £15,000 for someone to travel to Switzerland, to the Dignitas clinic, to then choose to end their life. Of course, you've got the flights, you've got the cost of the clinic. Big upheaval, people not being able to be with their families, to be able to choose their time of death. And therefore you're basically saying, so, well, better off people have that option, but people who aren't better off don't have that option. And that seems just completely wrong.
My Death, My Decision, we say we're exporting compassion to Switzerland for those who can afford it.
Yeah.
It's absolutely absurd. And also, anyone who accompanies someone to Switzerland faces prosecution and a possible jail term of up to 14 years. Now, I'd have to admit that those cases have been rare, because like with the Mercy killings, there's guidance on the public interest in prosecution. But can you imagine the stress? You've just accompanied someone to an assisted death in Switzerland, you're grieving, and you come back and you're arrested by the police.
Yeah. One time is too many. Can I ask you about this other case? It's very different. Most of these cases, you're looking at older people. This is a case of a 24-year-old anorexic woman. She is, skeletal now. She's lost, so much weight, but she's eaten so little in recent years, in recent months. She basically just lost the capacity, medics say, to make a decision herself about her own life. And yet, she's got a body mass index of between 8 and 10. That's not, she's just bone now. But she signed an advance directive last year refusing life-saving care. And this week, a judge ruled that although she's too sick to make decisions about her care, she should have the autonomy to decide whether she continues treatment or not. And she is going to be allowed to die, despite her parents pleading with doctors to continue treatment to keep her alive. This feels to me, as a mum, as a very different case.
Yeah, well, it is actually very different, because advanced decisions are a whole different sort of area, where the point of an advanced decision is that when you have capacity, you can write down in what circumstances you wouldn't want life-sustaining treatment, because you may lose capacity. And as a matter of law, the medical team must respect your previous decision made when you had capacity. In this case, and I obviously incredibly distressing, and I have daughters too. But the point is that she made the advanced decision when she had capacity. It sounds like she didn't have capacity now, and the whole point of the decision is that you're looking forward to what your view might be at the time that you get into particular circumstances. So
except, of
it's
course,
very
we know that
different from assisted dying.
It's fundamentally a mental health disorder, and therefore it's very difficult that someone, you could argue they're incapacitated by the mental health disorder. But again, at what point do we decide when someone is or not? But these are very difficult areas of law. I think the key thing is, in every individual circumstance, we need to be looking at what is right for the people, what is right for the family, and having those safeguards, but allowing people to have autonomy. Trevor, I really appreciate you joining us. That's Trevor Moore. He is chair of My Death, My Decision. Thanks so much for joining us. Let's bring Sam Armstrong in. Look, we're talking about politics and kids' teeth and stuff. This is really important stuff. There's no doubt at all our politicians are way behind the general public on this.
I could not disagree with you more on this particular topic. And I think the case of the anorexic patient tells you the problem with it. Every single jurisdiction around the world that has legalised assisted dying lets anorexics be prescribed assisted dying medication, poison, to kill them. An 18-year-old girl...
We don't have to go along with that.
No one has found a way to draft a law, because you have to draft a law. No one has found a way to draft a law that excludes anorexia and includes all the other diseases that you want to consider. Nobody.
Well, no, because you could have a law which is very clear that unless someone, you have to be in pain that will never, your end of life care, or
all of
6 months left to live,
all of that can apply to anorexia.
Or you've got a disease that will kill you. But you can cure anorexia by eating.
According to doctors, anorexia is incurable. It can only go into remission. You can treat the symptoms. You can't treat the underlying cause. You can manage it. And without treatment, it will cause death within 6 months. Yeah. That means everywhere around the world, an 18-year-old girl can walk into an assisted dying clinic, kill themselves without their parents ever being told.
Well, they are an adult. At 18, you are an adult. And that's the difficult thing, is it, where we draw the line. I know lots of people who've worked in the medical field, particularly people who've gone into, very, infirm old age care homes, who've seen people in geriatric wards and have said, that's not for me. That's an existence, not a life. Now, other people will feel very differently, and they would want the choice to end their life when they could. Why shouldn't they be allowed to do that?
Well, the other thing you see is people on wards in Canada where they have this very liberal euthanasia policy.
But we don't have to go down that route. Now, answer my question. Why shouldn't they be able to do that?
What? Because 67% of those in Oregon that say they want to die under their system do so because they don't want to be a burden on their family. That is not a good thing. That is not a good thing for.
I don't want to be a burden on my husband. I've got no intention of our daughter ever letting. She's an only child. I don't want to be. I want to be around as long as possible. But I don't want to be a burden on my child for sort of 10 years.
But what if it was the other way?
What if
it was the other way around, Julia, and your child?
I've got a duty of care to my child that is different from her duty of care to me.
In 20 years' time, say she developed a horrible disease and was dying, and she said, "I want to die because I don't want to be a burden on you." How horrifying would that be? That's different.
That's the job of being a parent. Not just helping them clean their teeth, as we were discussing earlier. It's part of the job, isn't it? That you are supposed to be there for them no matter what. That's sort of. I think it's fascinating. I think a lot of this comes down to religion. We know we've got the bishops in the House of Lords and many people of religious persuasion in the Commons, and I think that has a massive impact on this. But again, I do think that the public feel very differently, and there are ways of